Welcome to our Lunchtime Live program on WJEJ. It's a partnership once a month with Washington County Public Schools. This is Will Kaufman from the Public Information Office, and my guest today is Erica Greenwald. We're going to focus on her work with the elected Board of Education as the student member to the board, but just as a quick couple of side notes, she's a student in the system, so we'll talk a little bit about what that role has been for many, many more years than her work on the elected board. Erica, welcome. Thank you very much for agreeing to do the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
How did you get the seat on the elected board? Tell us about the process that led to your appointment to the board.
Sure. So it's actually an election, and the student member is elected by the County SGA. I was elected for the first time in April of 2015. It was just a regular General Assembly, and there were probably about 150 students there. And each candidate had to give a 5-minute speech and then was a part of about a 30 to 40-minute question and answer session. And then from there, all the delegates that were present were able to vote, and they elected me as a student member for the first term, my first term, which was from 2015 to 2016. And then that same process was repeated in May of 2016 when I was elected into my second term.
It's not really done that often where somebody serves 2 terms.
I think I actually might be the first student member from Washington County to serve 2 terms, because actually one of the first things I did when I was on the board was I reformed the student member policy, and in there it had actually stated that the student member could only serve one-year term. And at the time I wasn't really thinking that I would serve a second term, but I thought it was kind of an unnecessary regulation, especially because all around the state there have been other student members serving 2 terms. So in Washington County, I'm pretty sure I was the first, but it's pretty common around the state of Maryland.
Leading into that first election, what prompted you to begin with? What were the factors that, I'm going to take a shot at this?
I had prior experience with student leadership through our County SGA, through North High student government, through our state SGA. But one thing that I had not had a lot of experience with was advocating for students without students. So I've been a part of many student leadership organizations and advocated for students with students, but I had never really been a part of any type of board or governing body that was where the role of advocacy was without other student leaders. I had not had experience working with adults like my board colleagues, like senior staff, like our superintendent. And that was one of the pieces that interested me most, and I think is what distinguishes the student member position from other student leadership positions in the county.
How did you present your candidacy before that first election?
I really wanted to focus on increasing the student voice. I wanted to focus on not only hearing what students are saying and bringing that to board meetings, but the one thing that I really put a lot of emphasis on was bringing what's happening at the board back to students, because I felt that was a piece of communication that had not really reached its full potential. So for me, that's one thing that I still focus on now, is not only hearing what students are saying and sharing that with my colleagues and letting that impact the direction of the board, but I've also really focused on taking what's happening at the board level, whether it's a new policy or something like the digital learning plan or academic hub, and bringing that back to students and then letting them engage in the discussion.
Do you think the Student Government Association across the county, at school and across the county, it strongly represents the students? Do you and your fellow SGA members across the county, how do you go about that in actually forming representation of the students? How do you know? How do you know what the issues are? How do you carry that out?
So to your original question, do I think it is a fully representative body? Honestly, no. And that's one thing we really struggle with, and something that I struggle with as a student member, because I don't only listen to what the County SGA is saying. I focus a lot on other interest groups within the county. But that's something that our County SGA has really struggled with, is how do we make ourselves more representative? How do we entice all different types of students to be involved in student leadership, not just the typical student leaders? So one thing that I am hoping to work on in these next couple of months and then pass on to our next student member is to create an advisory committee for the student member. And so at this point, the County SGA has kind of served as my own advisory committee. I run stuff by them. They vote typically on what I pursue. But I'm hoping to create a new body or an additional body rather, that will be a little bit more representative of all different types of interest, all different types of students, whether it's socioeconomic diversity or racial diversity. And that's one thing that I'm actively working on right now that I hope will mitigate some of these issues.
You seem the type, though, at the individual level to be doing some of that work, to branch out your representation of all students. How have you gained insights from all of the demographics across the entire school system?
One thing I've really tried to focus on is keeping an open line of communication with my email, with my phone, Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that that's allowed me to hear a lot of different perspectives from a lot of different types of students. I've also really worked on creating different opportunities for students to share their opinions and how they're feeling as it's relevant to board matters. So whether that's planning a forum for students to evaluate the digital learning plan, which I'm working on right now with Dr. Kahanik, or various other types of ways to evaluate programs or initiatives in WCPS, that has allowed me to hear from all different types of students with all different types of opinions.
Do you have to prove yourself to the students? Just the general day-to-day students, not your fellow student leaders, but the general populace at your school and across the county. Do you have to prove yourself? Do you have to prove that you're credible with them? That, in other words, that average student who may have either a specific concern or just some broad ideas about things, how do they know that you're going to truly actively represent, or at least take the shot at representing what they have to say or what their ideas are?
I hope that by keeping open communication and then having some success in sharing student thoughts with board members and then pointing out that impact on votes that our board has taken or initiatives that we've pursued has been clear enough to at least some students that I want to hear what you have to say. I'm interested in it. You don't have to be a student leader to approach me. That I want to hear what all students in WCPS are thinking, what they're saying, what they want to pursue. And I think that just by continuing to advocate for students and continuing to create opportunities, that builds that credibility and trust between me and the students of WCPS to show that I'm here for you. I'm here because you elected me, and I'm your representative.
Name me some things that you've brought to the board in your time on that panel that have turned out to be either truly enriching conversation, enriching debate, and may have led to what we could call successes. What would you term successes that you believe you've brought to the table, that have turned into some level of reality?
So one experience in particular that I think really fits this question is probably about a year ago at a General Assembly for the student government. We did what is known around there as roundtables, and we focused on how WCPS treats the PARCC assessment. So how is it given? What is the student feedback? Not just on the exam, because that's not something we can really change, but factors that we have control over. Whether it's are we actually preparing students for PARCC exams, whether that's content or the use of technology to take that exam. And so I collected all different types of opinions and data. We had specific questions that we targeted so we could get certain types of data to then present. And so a month after those roundtables, I presented with two of my student government colleagues a full feedback, an aggregate of feedback of how the students felt the PARCC exam was going in WCPS. So we talked about, do students feel prepared to take the exam on an iPad? Do they feel that their teachers are preparing them content-wise? And a bunch of other different factors, which I think led to a really fruitful discussion, not only in that business meeting, but through subsequent discussions with other board members and with our superintendent, that I think has really created more of a passion for the digital learning plan, and I think has positively impacted students in WCPS.
That's big time stuff. That's countywide. That's at a much higher level than what I think some folks believe would be, student issues. Are there other issues that don't have the same level of intensity, don't have the same broader impact? Just day-to-day student rights things, things that could change, whether it's just practices across the county, maybe in individual schools or programs, things like that you've learned of through one means or another, and ultimately have formed them into something for the board to at least hear and maybe address?
So when it comes to smaller issues, the one thing that I focused on pretty early in my term was rewriting the student member policy that changed the way I think the student member was perceived, so that the student member just isn't a representative or isn't a liaison, but that they are a full member of the board. And as I mentioned earlier, it partially changed how many terms the student member could serve. As for smaller, more day-to-day issues, those are things that don't really get a lot of the spotlight or get a lot of time in business session, because those are things that I usually take care of on my own. So when a student shares with me, okay, I'm having this one particular issue, I think that we should, any number of things. My school needs more tennis rackets, whatever it may be. Those are smaller concerns that are equally valid to bigger concerns that I will usually pass off to a staff member, or I will share with a board member to question, how should I be going to try to mitigate this issue? So those are things that don't really show up all that often in business session or show up all that often in policy discussions, but are often things that I hear and then share with staff and are typically resolved.
If you're just joining us, this is Lunchtime Live on WJEJ with Washington County Public Schools, the third Thursday of the month at this time. You can also find replays, the actual file of the show on the school system's YouTube channel once we upload it there. So it lives forever, so we have to be good on the month by month. What's your time commitment? Because what you're describing is a very active role. It's not as if you don't have things to do at school, and as a senior, and now we're running out of time, things preparing for your future, whether in college or beyond. What's the time commitment to being the student member on the board?
The time commitment is far more significant than what I would have imagined, because I think I had probably pictured that I would be attending, business sessions and work sessions, the things that are visible to the public, that are visible to my colleagues. What I hadn't expected was the amount of work that goes in behind the scenes, all of the emails you have to respond to, the calls from constituents, whether that's doing research to understand issues that are coming up during board meetings, or fully understanding policy or specific issues within our county. But then another thing that also takes up a lot of time that I think is something that I probably only experienced as a student member, that my other colleagues probably don't have as much experience with, is trying to create forums to directly hear what students are saying. Because as board members, they're elected to speak for the people, and they have their own constituency. But since mine is a lot more specific, I'm actually able to create different forums or different opportunities for students to directly share with me what their thoughts are on specific issues, or if it's something like the PARC exam or the digital learning plan. And that's something that takes a lot of time, not only to execute, but to prepare and to brainstorm. And I also spend, I think, a significant amount of time thinking of ways to engage students in board governance, how to create more leadership positions. And, that's time-consuming work, but it's definitely work that I enjoy.
Is there value, and I know there are programs, there are particular individual school-based programs to continue to develop leaders as young people. What do you guys do at North High? The Student Government Association is one thing, but in classes, in other programming around school or around the county, whatever you're aware of, that continues to develop student leaders.
We're really lucky to have a county that really values student leadership and student advocacy. And even at North High, we have a principal advisory committee that meets and shares our concerns with our principal, Mr. Alshire. And every club at North High, whether it's FCA or if it's student government or any number of clubs, they all have officer teams. So they have a president, a vice president, and those students are given the opportunity to lead their specific club. But then the students who are part of those clubs also get opportunities to take initiative and lead a new project or pursue a new idea. So I think there is a culture in this county, and certainly in North High, that values and promotes student leadership, whether it's in the classroom or if it's on the football field or if it's in the boardroom or if it's, at a club meeting. And that's something that I think really makes WCPS really special.
Name some of the people you've worked with, you've worked beside, you've been either in class or in school with or on the board with. Name me. Let's drop some names at this point of folks who have impacted you in a positive way.
I've been really lucky to have a lot of mentors that have greatly impacted my service and my understanding of boardsmanship. I would say 4 people in particular that really went out of their way in the most extraordinary way were Dr. Wilcox, Mrs. Brightman, Dr. Hardings, and then Mr. Eidenauer. And at the time, Mrs. Brightman, Dr. Hardings, and Dr. Wilcox were the board leadership when I came on the board. And they spent, an absurd amount of time making sure that I understood what was happening. They helped me acclimate to the position because there's not really any model that the student can engage in to prepare themselves for their service on the Board of Education. I attended one training with other student members around the state of Maryland, but it's a position that is so much more complex than anything I could have imagined. And one thing that I really struggled with was keeping up with all of the elements outside of the boardroom. So it's not really what's just happening in business meetings. It's what's happening at county commissioner meetings that impact what we're doing in business session or impact the way we're going about certain issues. And so that's where Dr. Hardings and Mrs. Brightman really helped me. So they really expanded the way I viewed the position, the impact of the position, and they were the most incredible mentors. And they also provided not just mentorship, but a lot of friendship as well that has really made the position very meaningful for me.
There have to be times where even with the energy flowing, with the actual business, the interactions, all that you're gaining at so many levels, there has to be a point where on the day-to-day, you have to draw a line just to do schoolwork, to do your projects. I mean, you're in the IB program at North, right?
Yeah, I am.
Which is not something that anybody's skating through. I mean, you can't fake it through that. So, if nothing else, time management has to be huge for you.
Absolutely. It's a really big component, especially because I really enjoy the service. It makes it difficult to sometimes prioritize either myself or my personal life over my service on the Board of Education. And that has been a hard balance to find, especially during my second term when I was balancing college applications and a million other things that really make senior year so crazy. So time management has been a skill that is required of the position, and I don't know that I necessarily am perfect at managing my time, but I've been lucky to find at least some balance that has made the position manageable.
For those folks who don't know the program or don't have the best feel for it, describe the International Baccalaureate program.
So the IB program is an intense academic cohort that starts your junior year and then goes through the end of your senior year. And essentially, it simulates your freshman and sophomore year of college. So you are taking very rigorous classes. There are 6 different groups of classes. Like, for example, group 4 is like the hard sciences, and you have to take one from each group, a certain amount of higher levels, and this really gets into the weeds of it. But essentially, it's a really challenging academic program that is very rigorous in the classroom, has high expectations for the way students should lead inside of the classroom and outside of the classroom. It has community service requirements and also has a lot of bigger projects that students are expected to engage in that take significant amounts of time.
So let's put that together with senior year of elected board service, getting ready for college, the college application process, which I'm guessing for you is not like one and done. I'm guessing you didn't send out 3 applications, filled in the blanks, signed it, and sent it off. My guess is that was a little more of an extensive process for you. This senior year has to be your couple of days right after the end of the school year have to be just lying in the grass and looking up at the sky just to balance all of this.
Yeah, and I think that's what made my second term so much more challenging than my first, because during my first term, there were so many different moving parts on trying to get myself acclimated on the board and trying to understand what this position really meant. But then with my second term, senior year really just dominated a lot of my time, and whether that's more projects with IB or harder classes or applying to 8 colleges in the end, it was incredibly difficult to manage my board service with my schoolwork, with college applications, and in the end it just came down to sacrificing a lot of sleep so that I could still see my friends and engage in a meaningful and fun senior year.
Where do you stand on college at this point? Anything to share?
At this point, I am deciding between Loyola of Maryland and then the University of Maryland. And so I have until May 1st to officially decide and put down a deposit. And I think at this point, I'll probably be writing out that deadline.
Yeah. What are you going to do? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I'm thinking that I want to study political science or psychology and maybe minor in Spanish. But career-wise, I really have no clue. I definitely know that I want to travel after my undergrad, maybe teach English abroad for a while. But as for a career, I'm thinking that it will be something either focused in politics or history or law. But at this point, your guess is as good as mine.
Would you foresee, because of your experience in gaining the seat that you have on the Board of Education, when we talk about politics, there are so many things other than elected office. Could you see yourself down the line in a community, wherever you settle, in whatever setting it is, actually running for office?
If you would have asked me this question before my service, I probably would have had I would have had a much more optimistic answer. And after 2 years on the board in a county where there was so many toxic elements and so many contentious experiences, I'm not sure that I would engage in local politics after this. I mean, it's certainly an option. I don't want to rule anything out, and I've really enjoyed my service on the board, but the experience was far more challenging than what I expected, and I'm not sure that challenge would be something that I would want to pursue again after this service.
Well, there are certainly, and we're not, that's not a black and white question and answer either. There are so many ways to serve a community, to serve a jurisdiction, to be of service.
Absolutely.
Without running for office. I was just curious if and that's telling. I mean, it really is, because I admire folks who step up for whatever the motivation is to run for any office. I mean, there is something to that, to putting yourself out. And putting yourself on the line and getting into the process. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to govern
Absolutely.
At every imaginable level. We'll see. We'll see where you settle. We'll see what your career is like. We'll see what all the other factors are like. Hard to tell.
Exactly, yeah.
Hard to tell. When you look back at these couple of years, could you have guessed, say, 4 years ago, coming into high school, that all of these things would have unfolded like this? Did you have ideas that some of these things would have come to pass?
I would have had no idea that I would have ever served on the board, and even months before my service started, I would never have had an accurate image of what my service would have looked like. All of the challenges, all of the high points, everything that's happened has definitely. Some have been pleasant surprises, others not so much, but everything that's happened has certainly exceeded and changed my expectations.
How about out of school? Tell us about yourself out of school. I mean, off of the job, so to speak. What else is going on?
Like I said before, the IB program is incredibly rigorous, so schoolwork does take up a really large portion of my time, but outside of school, I like playing tennis, and I played on North High's team for my first 3 years, but this year I did have to give it up just because of college applications and all of the other moving parts. But I love hanging out with my friends. I love traveling, hanging out with family. I really enjoy shopping, all different types of stuff.
How about some of your fellow students? When you look across, so if we lined up, 20 friends, serious acquaintances, fellow SGA members, whomever they may be, give me a cross section of those folks. What their plans are. Is there is there any general characterization of the folks in your group?
Almost all of my friends are planning to go to college at this point and are thinking that some type of schooling after their undergrad will be necessary, whether that is med school, law school, whatever that may look like. But a common theme in a lot of my friends is that almost all of them engage in different clubs within my school. Almost all of them are in either the IB program or some type of program that's similar. So almost everyone that I would say that I'm close to is just as stressed out and high-strung as I am at this point in senior year. So feeling like I don't have enough time to do all the things that I want is a feeling that I think is shared by a lot of my peers and a lot of my friends.
How do you explain the difference between you and your immediate peers and the kids who are phoning it in, for lack of a better term? They've gone through a school career where they haven't really worked it. They'll graduate. They may have designs on either community college or a job. Well, what's the difference in the range? Give me your observations on the range of kids who are active, who are performing well, who have goals, and the kids who not so much.
Honestly, I don't know what factor really distinguishes those two groups. I don't know if it's motivation or opportunities that have been provided, or if it's a lack of stimulation from family, from teachers, whatever it may be. But what I do know is that the group that is in the IB program or in programs similar is there because they want it. Right. They're there because they've been stimulated and they enjoy the feeling of academically rigorous classes. They enjoy the feeling of being involved. And I don't know if students that aren't in those types of programs haven't had that experience, so they don't know what that's like. That might be overly optimistic. I'm not sure, but I don't know what that specific factor is.
Biggest challenge for you in school over these, let's say, the last 2 years. Give me just the hardest thing. Man, I've really struggled with this, whatever this is.
If it was a class, it would definitely be my higher level biology class.
Right.
Absolute, hands down.
Right. In fact, all of us are agreeing, and we're not even in it. That seems to be, that would seem to be.
It is easily my most challenging class, but if it was one factor that has made school challenging, I would definitely say it's time management. Feeling like there's not enough time to do smaller class assignments, and then not having enough time to keep up with extracurriculars and board service and my social life and all different types of components. It's really hard to find a good balance, and I'm not sure that I found that balance or that many of my peers really have either.
What did you miss? With all that your schedule has brought to these last couple of years, what's something that you didn't get to do?
I did not get to sleep a lot. That's definitely my answer. Okay. I definitely had to sacrifice a lot of sleep and probably complete mental stability to try to keep up with everything. But, that's a choice that I made and one that I stand by.
You ready? I mean, you ready to graduate and go through that transition?
I think I'm ready for the next challenge, the next place. I'm excited for college for sure. But I'm definitely sad to be leaving, friends, family, teachers, because I have a really awesome setup with the IB program. I have teachers that are amazing, friends that are incredible that I get to see all day, every day, and that's definitely going to be something that I miss.
Well, I'll say good luck to you. It's been exciting. It's been rewarding to watch you work at any number of levels and to hear the insights into how that all took place this year and in previous years. So good luck to you. We'll say that from all of us.
Thank you very much.
Erica Greenwald is the student member of the Washington County Board of Education, has been for 2 terms, and is our guest on Lunchtime Live. The show is heard the third Thursday of the month, a partnership between Washington County Public Schools and WJEJ.